The American dream wasn't supposed to look like this, at least not according to Mark Thompson. Oak Ridge Estates sat like a perfectly pressed collar on the suburban landscape of Millbrook County, a testament to manufactured perfection. From the moment you entered through the wrought iron gates, themselves a monument to controlled aesthetics, you knew this was no ordinary neighborhood. Identical street lamps curved with calculated elegance, their soft LED lights casting uniform shadows on streets so clean they looked almost sanitized. Mark had discovered the neighborhood quite by accident. He was driving back from a particularly grueling software development conference, his Tesla Model 3 navigating the outskirts of the city when a real estate sign caught his eye. Oak Ridge Estates, luxury living reimagined, blazed in metallic letters, surrounded by meticulously trimmed hedges that seemed to have been sculpted by laser precision. At 38, Mark was the quintessential tech professional. Single, successful, with a career that had taken him from a small startup to a senior position at a prominent Silicon Valley cybersecurity firm. He wasn't looking to buy, but something about Oak Ridge called to him. A siren song of stability, of finally putting down roots after years of moving between corporate apartments and short-term rentals. The sales tour was nothing short of theatrical. A woman named Diane, dressed in a crisp navy blazer that matched the neighborhood's color palette, guided prospective buyers like a choreographed performance. Her smile was perfect. Her pitch was flawless. Oak Ridge isn't just a neighborhood, she would say, her hand sweeping across the manicured landscape. It's a lifestyle, a commitment to excellence. The amenities were impressive. A state-of-the-art community center with a gym that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Tennis courts so pristine they seemed untouched by human feet. A community garden where every plant appeared to have been positioned by an architectural designer rather than a gardener. But it was the rule book that truly revealed Oak Ridge's soul. The Homeowners Association Handbook was a work of bureaucratic art. Leather-bound with gold-embossed lettering, it read less like a set of community guidelines and more like a constitution. 67 pages of intricate regulations covering everything from acceptable window treatments to approved methods of holiday decoration. Section 4, paragraph 3 was particularly memorable. All exterior home modifications must be submitted in triplicate to the Architectural Review Committee. Submissions shall include no fewer than 3 color renderings, a detailed material specification report, and a written explanation of how said modification enhances the community's aesthetic harmony. Mark should have seen the warning signs, but like many who dream of a perfect home, he was willing to overlook the red flags. Victor Hardcastle, the HOA president, was a retired military logistics officer who had found his true calling in suburban regulation enforcement. At 65, he moved through Oak Ridge like a human surveillance system, his wire-rimmed glasses reflecting a world of perfect right angles and immaculate boundaries. His office in the community center was a shrine to order. Pristine file cabinets, color-coded folders, a wall of framed certificates and commendations that spoke to a lifetime of following and enforcing rules. A large portrait of himself in military dress uniform watched over the room like a stern guardian. Hardcastle didn't just manage the HOA, he embodied it. The first time Mark met him was during the final stages of home purchase, a mandatory community orientation that felt more like an induction into a strict military unit than a welcome to a new neighborhood. "We maintain standards here," Hardcastle had said, his voice as crisp as his pressed khaki pants. "Oak Ridge isn't just a place to live. It's a statement of collective excellence." Mark had nodded, impressed by the man's conviction. He signed the papers, paid his initial HOA fees, and received his welcome packet, a glossy binder that would soon become his first battleground in a war he never anticipated fighting. Little did he know that beneath the perfectly trimmed hedges and behind the immaculate facades, a bureaucratic nightmare was waiting to unfold. Oak Ridge Estates, where the American dream met its most formidable opponent. The first citation arrived on a Tuesday. Crisp white envelope, certified mail, the Oak Ridge Estates letterhead gleaming with an almost malevolent precision. Mark remembered the moment clearly. He was working from home, debugging a complex cybersecurity algorithm when the mail carrier's footsteps paused at his mailbox. The envelope felt heavy with bureaucratic intent, its weight somehow different from ordinary mail. He opened it with the careful precision of a man who had spent years parsing through lines of complex code. Each word was a potential vulnerability, each sentence a potential trap. The violations were simultaneously laughable and terrifying in their specificity. 1. Mailbox Regulation Violation, Section 7.23. Mailbox height exceeds standard by 0.5 inches. Required immediate modification or replacement. Fine, $250. 2. Exterior color deviation, Section 5.17. Fence color determined to be Stonehenge gray instead of approved platinum mist. Color variance, 3.2% deviation from approved palette. Fine, $250. 3. Decorative element non-compliance, Section 8.42. Welcome mat does not meet community aesthetic standards. Handcrafted artisan mat deemed excessively individualistic. Fine, $250. Total fine amount, $750. Payment due, 14 days from receipt. The letterhead bore Victor Hardcastle's signature, a precise angular scrawl that looked like it had been drafted with a military-grade ruler. Mark's first instinct was to laugh. His second was to verify. As a software engineer, he understood the importance of precision. He pulled out his laser measuring tool, a habit from years of technical work, and began to investigate each claim meticulously. The mailbox, standard manufacturer specifications, exactly regulation height. His fence, purchased from the community-approved vendor, with an official color swatch that matched perfectly. The welcome mat, handmade by a local artist, featuring a subtle geometric pattern that he found both elegant and understated. He drafted a response, not an emotional plea, but a clinical, data-driven refutation. Each point was accompanied by photographic evidence, manufacturer specifications, and a detailed breakdown of why the citations were baseless. Dear Mr. Hardcastle, the letter began, after careful review of the citations issued on date, I respectfully contest the following violations. The response was a masterpiece of technical communication. Mark included manufacturer specifications for the mailbox, color certification from the fence paint manufacturer, artist details and material information for the welcome mat, precise measurements and photographic evidence. He sent the letter via certified mail. Return receipt requested. A digital copy was emailed to the HOA's official communication address. He even created a time-stamped PDF for his personal records. Victor Hardcastle's response arrived exactly 7 days later. It was a model of bureaucratic dismissal. Dear Mr. Thompson, your contestation has been reviewed by the Architectural Compliance Committee. After careful consideration, the original citations remain in full effect. Specific notes. Mailbox height, while technically within manufacturer specifications, does not meet the spirit of community standards. Fence color, though from an approved vendor, appears to have been affected by environmental factors that alter its approved appearance. Welcome mat fails to demonstrate a commitment to community aesthetic harmony. Fines will continue to accrue until full compliance is achieved. Regards, Victor Hardcastle, President, Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. The letter was typed on heavy cream-colored paper, each word a declaration of bureaucratic supremacy. Mark realized he wasn't just facing a homeowners association. He was facing a system designed to crush individual expression, one citation at a time. The war had begun. The escalation was both systematic and ruthless. Within weeks of Mark's initial contestation, Oak Ridge Estates transformed from a seemingly idyllic neighborhood into a surveillance state. White SUVs with tinted windows began making regular passes, their occupants armed with clipboards, measuring tapes, and digital cameras. Sarah Jenkins, Mark's next-door neighbor, was the first to experience the intensified scrutiny alongside him. A retired high school debate coach with a razor-sharp mind and 30 years of experience dissecting arguments, she had watched the unfolding drama with growing concern. Her own troubles began on a humid Wednesday morning. An inspector, clipboard-wielding and stone-faced, cited her for excessive botanical diversity in her front garden. The violation report read like a piece of satirical fiction. 3 lavender plants positioned non-symmetrically. Ornamental grass height varying by 0.75 inches. Unauthorized butterfly-attracting flower species. Decorative garden stones not meeting approved landscaping mineral composition. Fine amount, $1,200. Sarah's response was vintage debate coach, meticulously researched and devastatingly precise. She discovered that the HOA's landscaping guidelines were riddled with contradictions. Some sections actually encouraged native plant diversity, while others seemed designed to create impossible standards. Mark began documenting everything. His cybersecurity background meant he approached the HOA like a complex system to be analyzed and ultimately debugged. He created a spreadsheet tracking date of each citation, specific violations, exact measurements, photographic evidence, response strategies. The fines continued to multiply. What started as $750 quickly escalated to $3,500, then $7,000. Late fees appeared with mathematical precision. Victor Hardcastle seemed to take personal pleasure in each new citation. Their mutual friend and another neighborhood resident, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a local university professor, began experiencing similar harassment. Her crime? Solar panels that were visually disruptive and a rainwater collection system deemed non-compliant with aesthetic standards. The neighborhood began to change. Residents who once chatted cheerfully during weekend barbecues now avoided eye contact. Whispered conversations happened behind closed doors. Fear was a tangible presence, thick as the perfectly manicured hedges that lined every street. Mark discovered something more troubling during his investigation. The HOA's citations weren't random. They seemed strategically targeted. Newer residents, those without deep local connections, were being hit hardest. Those with political or business connections to Victor Hardcastle remained mysteriously unscathed. His cybersecurity skills proved invaluable. He began collecting digital evidence, emails, financial records, communication patterns. Each document was carefully archived, time-stamped, and backed up in multiple secure locations. Sarah's contribution was equally crucial. Her decades of teaching had honed her ability to build compelling arguments. She began reaching out to other residents, carefully documenting their experiences. A pattern emerged, a systematic pattern of harassment that went far beyond simple rule enforcement. The turning point came during the monthly HOA meeting. Mark and Sarah, having compared notes and gathered substantial evidence, realized this was more than just bureaucratic overreach. It appeared to be a calculated strategy of intimidation and potential property value manipulation. Victor Hardcastle, sensing the growing resistance, doubled down. New, even more baroque regulations appeared in the monthly newsletter. Mandatory color-coded trash bin positioning, precise lawn maintenance schedules, restrictions on outdoor furniture materials and colors, limitations on vehicle types and parking configurations. The neighborhood was becoming a fortress of conformity, with Hardcastle as its unyielding commander. But Mark and Sarah were just getting started. What had begun as individual resistance was quickly becoming a coordinated counteroffensive. The real battle for Oak Ridge Estates was about to begin. The tow truck arrived at 6:17 a.m. on a Saturday morning, its diesel engine shattering the suburban silence. Mark's 1967 Ford Mustang, a meticulously restored classic he'd inherited from his father, was about to become the latest victim of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association's relentless campaign. The violation was as specific as it was absurd. Section 9.32 of the HOA bylaws, buried in a labyrinth of legalese, prohibited commercial or non-operational vehicles from being parked in driveways for more than 72 consecutive hours. The Mustang, despite being in pristine condition and Mark's pride and joy, was deemed a storage vehicle. The tow truck driver looked uncomfortable. A middle-aged man named Rick, with calloused hands and a weathered baseball cap, avoided eye contact as he began positioning his equipment. "I'm just doing my job," he mumbled, not quite believing his own words. Mark was already recording everything. His smartphone captured each moment with the precision of a surveillance professional. Years of working in cybersecurity had taught him the value of documentation. But this was personal. The Mustang wasn't just a car. It was a connection to his late father, a man who had spent weekends teaching Mark about engines, about patience, about restoration. Every curve of the midnight blue body, every carefully maintained chrome detail was a memory, a piece of family history. Victor Hardcastle appeared like an apparition, clipboard in hand, watching the proceedings with a look of bureaucratic satisfaction that bordered on sadistic pleasure. "Regulations are regulations, Mr. Thompson," he declared, his voice as crisp as his pressed khaki pants. "No exceptions can be made." Mark knew this was more than just a car being towed. This was an attack on his very identity, on his right to personal expression. The neighborhood watched. Curtains twitched. Garage doors remained slightly ajar. Neighbors who had previously been too afraid to speak out were now witnessing the HOA's most brazen move yet. Sarah Jenkins was the first to act. A retired high school debate coach wasn't about to let an injustice go unchallenged. She began documenting everything, her smartphone joining Mark's in creating a digital record of the morning's events. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the local university professor, brought out her professional-grade video camera. "This is going to be evidence," she muttered, her academic training kicking into high gear. The tow truck's winch began to strain, preparing to lift the Mustang. Mark's mind raced. This wasn't just about a car. This was about power, control, the systematic destruction of individual identity in the name of community standards. His cybersecurity training kicked in. He began live streaming the event to multiple platforms, ensuring there would be an irrefutable digital record. Timestamps, geolocation, every technical detail was captured. Hardcastle seemed to sense the shift in momentum. His confident stride became slightly less assured. The neighbors who had previously cowered were now emerging, smartphones in hand, creating a digital wall of accountability. The OOA had crossed a line. Mark realized this was no longer about a car or a mailbox or a welcome mat. This was about fundamental rights, about the ability to exist as an individual within a community that claimed to value uniformity above all else. As the Mustang's front wheels left the ground, something crystallized in Mark's mind. This was war, and he was going to win. The war room was Mark's home office, a meticulously organized space that looked more like a cybersecurity command center than a typical suburban workspace. Multiple monitors displayed spreadsheets, legal documents, and a complex network diagram mapping out the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association's entire infrastructure. Years of professional experience in identifying system vulnerabilities had prepared Mark for this moment. Sarah Jenkins arrived with a massive binder, 3 years of carefully collected HOA documentation she'd accumulated during her time in the neighborhood. Dr. Elena Rodriguez brought her own contributions, academic research on municipal governance and community association laws. "This isn't just about your Mustang anymore," Sarah said, spreading documents across Mark's conference table. "This is about a systemic abuse of power." Their initial investigation revealed a labyrinth of interconnected issues. Victor Hardcastle owned a construction company that had received multiple no-bid contracts from the HOA. Several board members had financial connections that suggested serious conflicts of interest. The OA's financial records showed suspicious fund transfers and unexplained expenses. Violation fines were disproportionately issued to newer residents and those without local political connections. Mark's digital forensics skills proved crucial. He began by mapping the HOA's digital footprint, email chains, financial records, communication patterns. Each document was carefully analyzed, cross-referenced, and preserved. "We need a multi-pronged approach," he explained, pulling up a detailed strategy map on his largest monitor. "Legal challenge, public exposure, and systematic documentation." Step 1. Legal preparation. They discovered multiple violations in the HOA's own bylaws. Hardcastle and the board had been operating with a level of impunity that suggested they believed themselves untouchable. Dr. Rodriguez's academic connections became invaluable. She reached out to colleagues specializing in municipal law, urban planning, and community governance. Each conversation revealed another potential avenue of attack. The local media became their next target. Mark's carefully compiled documentation, complete with time-stamped evidence, financial records, and a comprehensive narrative of harassment, was too compelling to ignore. Sarah's decades of debate coaching came into play. She helped craft a narrative that was both factual and emotionally compelling. This wasn't just about rules and regulations. This was about fundamental rights, community integrity, and the abuse of power. They identified key vulnerabilities in the HOA's structure: lack of transparent financial reporting, selective enforcement of regulations, potential violations of fair housing laws, suspicious contract awarding processes. Mark created a secure digital repository, a digital war chest of evidence, multiple backups, encrypted storage, distributed across several secure locations. If Hardcastle thought he could intimidate them, he was severely mistaken. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A former HOA board member, tired of the organization's toxic culture, reached out anonymously. They provided internal documents that suggested the violations and fines were part of a deliberate strategy to pressure out certain homeowners. "It's about property values," the anonymous source explained during a carefully encrypted communication. "They want to create an environment of fear to control property turnover." Mark, Sarah, and Elena began building a coalition. Other homeowners who had been silent out of fear now found their voices. Support groups formed. A private online forum became a gathering place for those who had been victimized by the HOA's tactics. The strategy was clear: expose, challenge, and dismantle. Hardcastle had no idea what was coming. The war for Oak Ridge Estates had truly begun. The first strike came on a Tuesday. Local investigative journalist Karen Brennan arrived at the Oak Ridge Estates Community Center, her recorder armed and her notebook open. Mark had meticulously prepared a press packet, a comprehensive dossier that would make any cybersecurity professional proud. 12 manila folders, each color-coded and indexed, contained detailed financial irregularities, patterns of selective enforcement, potential conflict of interest documentation, testimonies from affected homeowners, photographic and digital evidence of HOA overreach. Victor Hardcastle's reaction was immediate and predictable. Panic masked as bureaucratic indignation. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Closed doors, hushed conversations, the kind of frantic strategizing that happens when a carefully constructed facade begins to crumble. Sarah Jenkins, with her decades of debate coaching experience, had prepared the homeowners. A coordinated communication strategy emerged. Each resident documented every interaction, every citation, every communication with military-like precision. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leveraged her academic network. Legal experts began reviewing the documentation. What had started as a neighborhood dispute was transforming into a potential landmark case of HOA misconduct. The local news picked up the story faster than Hardcastle could have imagined. "Suburban Tyranny, HOA Gone Wild," became the headline that Tuesday evening. Mark's carefully prepared documentation provided journalists with a treasure trove of investigative material. Within 48 hours, state regulators took notice. The first official inquiry arrived, a formal request for complete financial records, board meeting minutes, and communication logs. Hardcastle's response was telling. Instead of transparency, he doubled down on aggression. New citations began flooding mailboxes. Increasingly bizarre and specific violations appeared. Incorrect window shade positioning, unauthorized garden ornament placement, microscopic lawn height variations, improper trash can angle during collection days. But the tactics that once worked no longer carried the same weight. Homeowners who had previously cowered now stood united. Mark's digital war room became the nerve center of the resistance. Multiple monitors tracked. Media coverage. State regulatory communications. HOA board member activities. Public sentiment. Legal research and potential strategies. The anonymous HOA board member who had initially contacted them provided crucial insider information. Board members were beginning to fracture. Some wanted to fight. Others saw the writing on the wall and began looking for escape routes. Financial records told a damning story. No bid contracts, suspicious fund transfers, a network of financial relationships that suggested systemic corruption rather than mere bureaucratic overreach. Alina's academic connections proved invaluable. She identified experts in municipal law, urban planning, and community governance. Each conversation revealed another potential avenue of attack. The HOA's legal team began to realize they were facing more than just a typical homeowner dispute. This was a coordinated, strategic takedown. Hardcastle's confidence began to crack. The man who had ruled Oak Ridge Estates like a personal fiefdom for years now found himself on the defensive. Emergency board meetings became increasingly tense. Whispered conversations, nervous glances, the first signs of an organization beginning to implode. Mark understood the psychology of systems. In cybersecurity, he had learned that every complex structure has vulnerabilities. The HOA was no different. Each piece of evidence was a carefully placed lever designed to create maximum strategic pressure. The war had moved from the neighborhood to a much larger battlefield, and Victor Hardcastle was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the ones who document everything. The community center had never seen anything like it. What was supposed to be a routine monthly HOA meeting had transformed into a tribunal. Every seat was filled. The room buzzed with a tension that felt electric, dangerous. Mark Thompson sat in the front row, his laptop open, external hard drives lined up like soldiers ready for battle. Sarah Jenkins was beside him, her decades of debate coaching radiating a quiet, dangerous confidence. Dr. Alina Rodriguez had brought a team of legal experts, their briefcases stuffed with documentation that would make a federal investigator proud. Victor Hardcastle arrived precisely at 7:00 p.m., his usual swagger noticeably diminished. The man who had once ruled Oak Ridge Estates with an iron fist now looked like a general whose army was deserting. State regulatory investigators sat in the back, their neutral expressions betraying nothing. The agenda was simple, or so Hardcastle believed. Tonight's meeting will address community standards and, he began. Sarah interrupted, a move so precise it felt choreographed. I moved to review the financial records of the past 5 years, she stated. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades guiding high school debate teams to national championships. Hardcastle's face turned several shades of gray. Mark's laptop began a presentation. Screens around the room flickered to life. A technological ambush that would have impressed his most sophisticated cybersecurity colleagues. Financial records, contract details, a spider web of connections that reveal a systemic pattern of corruption. The evidence was overwhelming. No bid contracts awarded to Hardcastle's construction company, suspicious fund transfers, selective enforcement of HOA rules, deliberate harassment of specific homeowners, potential violations of fair housing regulations. One by one, the HOA board members began to crack. The anonymous insider who had initially contacted Mark now stepped forward, a board member named Michael Reynolds, whose conscience could no longer remain silent. We've been running this HOA like a personal piggy bank, Reynolds revealed. Victor has been manipulating property values, pushing out homeowners who don't fit his vision, and profiting from the turnover. The room was a powder keg of suppressed rage. Homeowners who had suffered in silence for years began sharing their stories. The couple forced out after receiving $50,000 in arbitrary fines. The single mother threatened with foreclosure over a flower bed. The retired veteran cited for parking his wheelchair-accessible van in his own driveway. Alina's legal team presented a comprehensive case. This wasn't just about HOA mismanagement. This was a systematic pattern of harassment, financial fraud, and potentially criminal behavior. State investigators took notes, their neutral expression slowly giving way to looks of increasing interest. Hardcastle's defense crumbled. His carefully constructed facade of bureaucratic superiority collapsed like a house of cards. Years of intimidation, of ruling through fear, were being dismantled in real time. The technology Mark had prepared was relentless. Digital records, time-stamped communications, a forensic trail that left no room for denial. By 9:30 p.m., it was over. The HOA board was effectively dissolved. Hardcastle would face multiple investigations: financial, legal, potentially criminal. The state regulatory body promised a full, comprehensive review. As the meeting concluded, Mark looked at Sarah and Alina. They had done more than just fight an HOA. They had exposed a system of institutional corruption. The suburban battlefield had been won, but the war was far from over. 6 months after the explosive HOA meeting, Oak Ridge Estates was unrecognizable. The state's investigation had been comprehensive and devastating. Victor Hardcastle faced multiple charges: financial fraud, abuse of power, and systematic harassment of homeowners. His construction company was dismantled. The once feared HOA president now awaited trial, his reputation in complete ruins. Mark's meticulously collected evidence became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Financial forensics revealed a complex scheme of kickbacks, fraudulent contracts, and deliberate manipulation of property values. What had begun as a personal battle over a tiled Mustang had exposed a systemic pattern of corruption that extended far beyond a single neighborhood. The Mustang, Mark's beloved classic car, sat proudly back in his driveway. More than just a vehicle, it had become a symbol of resistance. A new HOA structure emerged, democratically elected with transparent bylaws that protected homeowner rights. Sarah Jenkins, leveraging her years of experience, helped draft guidelines that balanced community standards with individual freedoms. Mark contributed his technological expertise, creating systems of accountability and communication that made future abuse nearly impossible. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's academic research became a case study. Publications explored how community associations could be reformed, using Oak Ridge Estates as a prime example of successful citizen-led transformation. The financial impact was significant. Homeowners who had been unfairly fined received full reimbursements. Property values, contrary to Hardcastle's manipulative strategies, actually increased as the community became known for its fairness and transparency. But the victory wasn't without its complications. Some residents struggled with the aftermath. Years of fear and intimidation had taken their psychological toll. Support groups formed, helping neighbors process the collective trauma of living under Hardcastle's regime. Mark found himself an unexpected local hero. Interviews, community meetings, academic conferences, his story of technological and legal resistance became an inspiration. He was invited to speak about community empowerment, digital accountability, and standing up to institutional corruption. The anonymous HOA board member who had initially contacted Mark, Michael Reynolds, became a key witness. His testimony was crucial in unraveling the full extent of the corruption. Seeking redemption, he worked tirelessly to help rebuild the community's trust. State legislators began drafting new laws inspired by the Oak Ridge Estates case. Stricter regulations for homeowners associations, enhanced oversight, and more robust protections for individual homeowners became a priority. At the one-year anniversary of the HOA's downfall, the community held a celebration. Mark's Mustang was the centerpiece, detailed and polished, a reminder of where the journey began. Sarah organized a neighborhood potluck. Elena brought academic colleagues to document the community's transformation. Victor Hardcastle's final legal appeal was denied. The once powerful HOA president would spend years fighting legal battles, his empire of intimidation completely dismantled. But for Mark, the true victory wasn't about punishment. It was about transformation. The neighborhood had become something extraordinary, a community that valued individual rights, practiced transparent governance, and understood the delicate balance between collective standards and personal freedoms. As he stood in his driveway, watching neighbors chat and children play, Mark reflected on the journey. What had begun as a personal fight over a car and some arbitrary rules had become something much larger. A testament to the power of documentation, technology, and collective action. The Mustang gleamed in the sunlight, a symbol of resistance, of hope, of victory.